when the crystal pylons plunged from the heavens and pierced our world, they were not but a nuisance to those whose land was directly affected by the impacts. In the years that passed, we adjusted. They became a fixture of our landscape. In some cases, entire towns cropped up surrounding them, believing the crystals to be a gift from the gods. That was all until the radiance. An unyielding stream of light that suddenly emanated from the crystal pylons. The blinding light evaporated all those it directly touched, leaving a writhing, solidified shadow in their place. Those who survived were the ones indoors at the time. It didn't take us long to figure out that merely covering ourselves was enough to protect against the radiance, but it left us functionally blind while going out to collect what little food we could find. Curiously, plants and wildlife remained unaffected, making survival not an impossible feat. Farming remained practically unchanged, but operating mostly by touch. Hunting, on the other hand, was a challenge. Specialized troops would go out in fives, using a series of unassuming sounds relayed to one another in order to pinpoint game. The shadows posed their own threat, roaming the countryside and viciously attacking anyone they'd come in contact with. Some towns were now completely occupied by shadows due to their position to a crystal. There were cases of families keeping a shadow of a loved one captive, believing that one day they will return to their former self. Unfortunately, in observing the shadows, no signs of humanity seemed to be present other than the base silhouette. Reputable augurs surmised that the person they once were had vanished, and that the shadows were mere imprints that were left behind. The seat of power in this new world became the Lightless Valley, a place that received ample sunlight but was out of reach of any crystal's radiance. Infighting was a common occurrence, but the king of the valley folk was quick to snuff out any treasonous behavior that would jeopardize the safety of his county. The Highlanders were a frequent antagonist to the valley folk, performing raids on an almost weekly basis. While their elevated position kept them protected from the light by a thick layer of fog, food was scarce. Their usual hunting grounds were either in the direct light of a crystal or infested by shadows. They never had a single leader, instead being comprised of several clans of varying sizes. The Highlander clans hated each other almost as much as they hated the Lightless Valley. A commonality that bound the peoples of these two regions was a question. Why? Why were we enduring such horror? Did we anger the gods? Was it an attack from another world? If so, why haven't they come to reprimand us or finish the job? Dwelling on such questions was short-lived because we all needed to know something more important. How do we stop it? Expeditions to the crystal pylons were somewhat frequent, making all manner of attempts to either quell or destroy them. Conventional weapons wouldn't manage so much as a scratch to the crystal's uncannily smooth surface. Religious fanatics would sacrifice people they deemed either heretical or pure to try and placate their god's vengeance. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, these sacrifices inadvertently led to the discovery of the one thing that could stop the radiance. During a ritual sacrifice of a murderer, right before the surface of a crystal, a priest wielding a ceremonial silver dagger overstepped when slaying the resulting shadow, sending the shadow and the dagger plunging simultaneously into the pylon. A booming sound reminiscent of both a crack and a ringing was reported to be heard from a few nearby townships. The once impossibly smooth surface was now coarse where the blow was struck. While the light had not yet ceased, this was the first damage ever to be inflicted upon a crystal pylon. In the subsequent weeks, word spread from the valley to the peaks. Fighting halted briefly as people pondered what they had heard. Eventually, others attempted to replicate the event to varying levels of success. The religious sect who discovered the method began sacrificing criminals en masse until the crystal crumbled into sand, and the light was extinguished. The fighting between the lightless valley folk and the Highlanders became worse than ever. The criminals sacrificed to the pylons included prisoners of war, angering either side. Previously, the Valley King had taken a defensive approach to the Highlanders, but due to an increased aggression and the removal of some of the crystals between them, he began ordering attacks on the smaller tribes in order to collect more sacrifices. The aggression from the king caused the Highlanders to do something rarely seen. They brokered an alliance amongst themselves. Now stronger than ever, the Highlanders raided the valley with a single goal in mind: to take the king and sacrifice him to a crystal. The valley was powerless against the united Highland, and the king was taken captive. The Highlanders brought the king to a nearby crystal, where scores of valley folk were present, but unable to intervene. It was at this moment when an augur stepped forward to attempt a different approach. Before the Highland army and the captured king, the augur brandished 3 blades with a severed shadow arm in hand. She took the first blade, a simple dagger made of steel, and coated it with shadow blood. With a loud scrape, it glanced off the crystal, leaving it without a scratch. The second blade was a ceremonial knife made of steel from the city's church. This too was covered in blood, but didn't make a mark. It was the third blade made of silver, which managed to pierce the pylon. The revelation didn't completely quell tensions initially, but it did reveal that no more bloodshed was needed to rid the land of the scourge that had gone on for far too long. One by one, the pylons fell, a process that slowly mended relations between the warring factions. It was through trial and error that it was discovered that a blade made of any pure metal, covered in shadow blood, was enough to fell a crystal. A crowd from all across the land gathered just to be present when the last crystal fell. It would mark the end of a waking nightmare. The king personally attended, as well as a few leaders of the Highland clans. And just like that, it was over. People from the valley, from the highlands, and from the countryside all threw off their protective layers and basked in the sun. We were finally free. In the time since, all the leftover shadows were rounded up and kept in captivity, just in case the crystals ever appeared again. We built observation towers to keep an eye on the sky in order to give ample warning if it ever happens again. So here I sit, telescope to the sky, searching for anomalies, as well as beacons lit across the land to relay a sighting to both observatories and the citizens nearby. Despite the relative peace, we all still ask ourselves, why?